This is the story of my first ever Pride event. And sure, you're looking perfect at your next Pride event with our LGBTQ Perfection line of shirts, hoodies, and more, available now on our merchandise store, linked below. Welcome everyone to Powered and Protected by Rainbows. I'm of course your host, Professor Pride. And on today's show, I'm telling you all about my first ever Pride event in Washington, D.C. But first off, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Anyway, on to story time. After I came out to my family in December of 2017 and very close friends in January of 2018, I knew that I wanted to go to an LGBTQ Pride event that summer and join my second family in celebrating who we are and who we love. So I found out there was a major Pride festival happening in Philadelphia, PA on June 9th through the 10th that summer, and I started planning my trip. In February, I even invited my best friend in the whole world and proud ally of our community, Becca, to go with me. And you've seen her on our show before. She's even one of our producers here at Powered by Rainbows. I had every detail planned out, from where we would park to what we would do throughout the whole day at the event. I even had all of the directions of the 2.5-hour trip memorized, just in case my GPS didn't work that day. But as you might have noticed, I told you this story was about my first ever Pride event in Washington, D.C., not Philadelphia, PA. Well, about a month before the event, an artist by the name of Troye Sivan announced he would be performing at the Pittsburgh, PA Pride event on June 8th, and then performing on the Capitol Pride stage in Washington, D.C. on June 10th. In case you've never heard me say it before, Troye Sivan is my all-time favorite artist. Everything about him is perfect, from his music, his activism, and even how sexy he is. He was even included in our Hottest Twinks competition earlier this year because of it. But most importantly, his gay music is what I listened to before I came out, and his song Heaven became this sort of anthem to my coming out story. It's the song I credit for giving me the strength to know I wasn't alone in being gay, and I was normal. Needless to say, his music means a lot to me. So if there was a way for me to incorporate a concert of his into my first ever Pride event, I was certainly going to do it. And that's why I texted my best friend and asked her if we can switch cities at the last moment, 1 month prior to our trip. I told her that because of the distance, it would have to be an overnight trip, but I would gladly cover the entire cost of the hotel. She luckily agreed, and soon enough, we were getting directions and planning our trip to Washington, D.C. I picked her up really early in the morning on Sunday, June 10th, as we headed down the interstate to the capital of the United States. We made it about halfway down to around Maryland before we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast, because I will freely admit, I was way too excited of a gay boy that I completely forgot to eat before we left town. As soon as we arrived in Washington, we went straight for the Holiday Inn Hotel, which we were staying in that night. They allowed us to park at the hotel throughout the day, as long as we had a reservation for that night. But the hotel was right across the street from the subway station, which took us into the city, so it made for an easy and most importantly, a safe way to travel into the heart of Washington. At first, I felt like I was the only one in the city who was wearing a rainbow t-shirt, and I actually hand-painted the t-shirt I'm wearing now just for that Pride event in Washington. It felt great to wear a rainbow heart around without caring if anyone thought I was gay anymore. After all, this whole weekend was about Pride, so there was no hiding who I love anymore because it should have never been something I felt embarrassed about in the first place. But as we walked onto the subway, all of the electronic signs telling you which train to take, all of those signs had rainbow flags for the entire weekend. And suddenly I knew I was about to meet my second family. After a short subway ride into the city, we came out directly in the center of the Mall of America, which is the grass field in front of the Capitol building, connecting it to all other major buildings. Becca and I walked over to the street where the event was taking place, and immediately we realized just how safe we were that day. Safety was always a concern for us, considering the terrorist attacks on our community that I've researched over the years. But at every entrance to the Pride event area, there were FBI trucks, check-in centers, and I kid you not, snipers on all of the roofs around the entire event to protect us. We later found out that the FBI and Washington Police both have an LGBTQ division, where everyone in it is LGBTQ. And those divisions were the units which were working the event that day, meaning they better understood the problems we could face and could better protect us because of it. So here's a massive shout out and thank you to the FBI and Washington LGBTQ police divisions for keeping us safe the entire day. But Becca and I arrived at 11 a.m. that day, and the event didn't start until an hour later, so we just walked around and watched them make the final touches to setting up. Plus, in arriving an hour early, we got to hear Troye Sivan and his band doing sound checks for their show 8 hours later. As the event began, Becca and I started walking around to every vendor who was there, and there were hundreds of vendors. By about 12:30 in the afternoon, the street was packed with an estimated 200,000 LGBTQ people. We just walked around, went up to each vendor, and kept trying to soak in as much information as we could while getting tons of free swag. A few hours into the event, there was a moment where I just needed to catch my breath for a second. I went over to the corner and I cried because everyone there completely understood and accepted me. It was the first time in my life when I felt like I was a part of a community, and finally, I found my home. As the hours passed, Becca and I made friends with a few people as we went vendor to vendor. Eventually, we stopped at the official Pride event merchandise booth, and I got this t-shirt. Becca even rode the mechanical bull, and we both signed our names to the event banner. Around dinner time, we stopped walking around long enough to get something to eat. And I will say, the food was very pricey for items which you could normally see at a local fair, but with no other real options other than the event vendors, I wasn't going to complain about the slightly higher price tag for a couple pieces of chicken. During that mediocre dinner, though, is when I finally stopped to realize how many kids were at the event. There were parents wearing t-shirts saying, "My child is trans and I'm proud," or "My child is gay and I'm proud." It was simply beautiful to see so much support from parents and so many kids already comfortable enough with something which took me 25 years to admit to myself. We walked around for a bit longer, and eventually we went to the main stage for the concerts that night. And that's when I met up with two of my extended family members. Their names are Luke and Seth, and they just happen to live in the city of Washington and be a gay married couple. They are my brother-in-law's cousins, so I saw them at some family functions over the years too. In fact, the year prior to this, they were at a family wedding, and I remember my sister and dad talking about Luke and Seth. But in that conversation, my family never once cared about the fact that they were gay. They spoke about Luke and Seth just like any other couple, and it was right around that same time when I was testing the waters with my family to know if they would accept me for being gay. And because of this conversation at one of our family members' weddings, I knew they would accept me. So I had a huge debt of gratitude to Luke and Seth, even though they didn't really know why until a year later, until this Pride event. But as soon as I met up with them, they gave me a big hug, and we talked for a while. It was honestly one of the best conversations I've had in a long time. And during that conversation, Seth even bought all of us a round of drinks, which was really sweet of him, so thank you. As it turns out, we are all huge fanboys of Troye Sivan, so we were having the best time together. In the bar area of the audience where we were standing, I did eventually notice a group of people by the stage. All of them were wearing their hoods and were members of the pup tribe community. As a pup for many years myself, I just couldn't resist the temptation, so I excused myself from our conversation for a moment and went over to celebrate with other pups. It was honestly surreal to talk with other members of the same tribe I belong to and not feel judged by anyone around us. Honestly, the whole day became a judgment-free zone. After some more conversation with my family members, my friend and I went to find a spot for the main concert that night. We found a spot right next to the control booth for the audio and lights, and soon enough, Troye Sivan came on stage. He ended up performing a few newer songs of his, but then performed the song Heaven. Needless to say, I was bawling my eyes out during the entire song, and I dang near fainted when I saw so many rainbow flags waving in the air. Still to this day, that is the most beautiful sight I have ever experienced, and I'm so lucky that I have filmed it in 4K. After the concert was over, I was far too excited to decide anything, so Becca chose the restaurant we would eat at. There wasn't many people there considering it was a few hundred feet away from a major event, and that should have been a warning sign to us. The food was quite terrible, but I spent most of the time at dinner crying happy tears, trying to calm down from the best day of my life, and writing a Facebook post which said, "I've spent my entire life holding my breath, waiting for this day. I've been a part of 4,000 plus events, and never before has one made me smile, laugh, and cry so much for all the right reasons. I got to spend the day with hundreds of thousands who have gone through the same process I went through and understand me more than most ever will. This has been a freaking year in the planning and a lifetime in the waiting. Today is the day I stop fearing the world because my fellow brothers and sisters don't. Today is the day I admit that when I'm in a relationship, it means I'm with an amazing man who stole my heart. Because today is about two things, love and fucking pride. I will always have both. And there's no room for hate, bigotry, or fear in there. I knew things back home might be severely different when I got back the next day. But in that moment, I stopped fearing the worst. So that Facebook post was my coming out letter to everyone who I haven't told privately up until that point. As soon as we were done eating, I asked Becca if we can take just one more photo. You see, my uncle Jeffrey Blake is a man who I speak about quite often, because my grandmother used to tell me stories of how him and I hid being gay for most of our young lives. So I feel a deep connection to him, even though I never met him in person. But I knew he never lived to see a day when being gay was decriminalized or marriage equality became the law of the land here in America. So Becca and I walked up to the stairs of the building, and I held my rainbow flag while standing on the steps of my nation's Capitol building. It was in that building which made it illegal for my uncle to love, but now I could stand there with a rainbow flag, free to love who I was always meant to, and the police were now protecting me. In case you're wondering, that photo is still one I have chosen to stay private for right now because it's too personal for me to share with anyone. But a photo I can share with you from that night is one we took on the way back to the subway, where we passed Trump Tower, and seeing that he was only 2 years into his presidency at that point and already the worst homophobic president in history, Becca and I decided to stop and take one last photo for the night. Because fuck Donald Trump. When we got back to the hotel, Becca got a shower and I cried my eyes out while reading all of the wonderful comments from my family and friends back home on that Facebook post. Then I got a shower and Becca went to sleep. I couldn't sleep much because I was far too excited and too busy crying happy tears. Long before making the trip to Washington, I knew this day would go down as a great day. But I simply wasn't prepared for it to be the best day of my life with no contest to any other day. Eventually, I got some rest, and in the morning, Becca and I went to a nearby Waffle House for breakfast. It was about a half hour down the road, but well worth the trip because her and I were joking and having the best time. After breakfast, we found out the Waffle House we went to was in the opposite direction from home. So it was a funny 30-minute drive back to Washington, so we could actually get on the road to go back to Pennsylvania. About an hour or so past Washington, Becca fell asleep in the passenger seat, and I played some Troye Sivan music on the stereo. But what I've never told anyone up until now, including Becca, is that it was in that exact moment on the drive home from Washington after she fell asleep that I started to wonder how many kids or adults suffer like I did for 14 years, knowing we are LGBTQ but are too afraid of coming out. How many kids aren't lucky enough to have their parents take them to a pride event and wear t-shirts saying they are proud as hell of their child for being LGBTQ? How many kids have to suffer through being told lies of how being gay is a sin, or suffer through bullying because they love someone different? And how many LGBTQ people feel like they're alone out there? And it was in that exact moment when I actually came up with the entire concept for this TV show. The LGBTQ community just gave me the strength to come out and gave me the best day of my life. The least I can do is give back to the community and help kids and others on their journey through a TV show talking about LGBTQ positivity and topics. So everything you're watching now, the few hundred episodes of our show so far, and the countless lives we've saved, are all thanks to that day. When we got back home, I had quite a few pictures to share with family and close friends. But for the first time in my life, I didn't share much of the video footage or pictures with the world on social media. For the first time in my life, the footage was far too personal to share. In fact, most of the footage in this episode today has never been seen by anyone, even my closest family members. I'm only sharing it with you now because I hope it shows you that you're not alone either. And there are massive amounts of footage I'm still keeping to just myself. Because even as a filmmaker, sometimes we aren't filming to entertain others, but instead, we're filming to remember special moments for ourselves. But I also took all of the comments on that Facebook post and printed them out. And still to this day, they are framed on the wall above my bed to remind me that I am far from alone. I spent 25 years hiding half of who I am, so sometimes I still need that subtle reminder in the morning. Overall, with the hotel, gas, food, shirt, and all other expenses, it cost me about $250 for a 2-day trip, which sounds a tad expensive. But sometimes the cost doesn't really matter, and that's why it was by far the best money I've ever spent, and I would gladly do it again in a heartbeat. I don't know if they'll be watching this broadcast someday, but I would certainly like to take a second to thank all of the Pride organizers of the Capitol Pride Festival for making it a truly perfect day. I'd also like to thank the FBI and Washington Police for keeping us all safe. And I would like to thank my best friend Becca, my extended family members Luke and Seth, and my entire family and friends group. I feared that when I came back home, I would be coming home to a few less friends and family members. But instead, I gained a few that weekend. And that shows you just how much progress we've truly made. Anyway, that's all for our episode today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you like our content and want to support more LGBTQ education in the future, please consider checking out our merchandise store or becoming a member. Don't forget to like this video, comment down below your LGBTQ-friendly thoughts, hit that rainbow subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes of the show, and share this video with others. As always, I'm your host, Matt Haslam. This has been PBR. Have a gay day, everyone, and bye for now. Watch Powered by Rainbows Season 3, only on MHP TV.